I assume that the 12 minutes that the senator referred to would come out of their 30 minutes.
Yes, that's correct.
The senator is correct.
Yes, that's good.
No objection.
Thank you.
Without objection?
No objection.
Without objection.
Finally, Senator Hagel's opposition to the use of sanctions, his apparent confusion about administration policies and its implications, and his apparent incomprehension of the threat a nuclear-armed Iran poses to international stability is alarming and would cause other nations to doubt the credibility of the President's commitments. Senator Hagel is an honorable man who has sacrificed much and bravely for our nation. About his character and love of country, there can be no doubt or debate. However, his positions on the principal national security issues facing our country, the Iranian nuclear program, resurgent Islamist terror threat in North Africa and the Middle East, and more broadly, whether we should maintain our ability to project strength in defense of our interests and allies, indicate to me a disqualifying lack of professional judgment. Also, Senator Hagel's complete lack of experience in running an enterprise of such size and complexity casts further doubt. Therefore, despite my esteem for Senator Hagel, on the basis of his record, I will not support his confirmation. I say this with regret, but he is the wrong person at the worst time for the job. This day, we can and must do better. I thank my colleagues.
Thank you.
Madam President.
The senator from Michigan?
Madam President, I yield 5 minutes to the senator from Florida.
The senator from Florida.
Madam President, I want to speak on behalf of asking my colleagues to support Senator Hagel's nomination, and let me just hit a couple of highlights. He volunteered to go into the Army during Vietnam. He was assigned to Germany. He volunteered to go to Vietnam. His brother was assigned in one part of Vietnam, he in another. His brother and he, his brother Tom, asked to be in the same unit. While on patrol in the jungles at night, his brother saved his life, and on another patrol at night, his brother, he saved his brother's life. He was wounded twice. He was medevaced. He asked to go back into the fight. He has served as Deputy Administrator of the Department of Veterans Affairs with 250,000 employees under his management. He represented the state of Nebraska in the Senate for 12 years. He co-authored the post-9/11 GI Bill with Senator Webb. Out of uniform and away from Capitol Hill, he has led the USO. Now, this is an exceptionally capable man who is a patriot, who has given extensive testimony to the Senate Armed Services Committee. He has cleared up the issues that have been asked over and over and over, including one that was raised about his role in authoring the Global Zero report. First, the report didn't propose anything. It was, in the words specifically used in the front end of the report, it was illustrative, proposing nothing but laying out different scenarios and possibilities. There was nothing that was proposed in a recommendation that we unilaterally disarm, reduce the arsenal, or eliminate the triad. And that would especially be so since another one of the co-authors was General Cartwright, the former commander of U.S. Strategic Command and the 8th Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So this is a critical time for national defense. It's a critical time of our country. We need to get on and approve the nomination so he can get on with his duties as Secretary of Defense. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Madam President,
The senator from South
I
Carolina.
have 5 minutes. Could you let me know when 4 is passed?
Yes.
Thank you
Yes, sir.
very much. I'd like to unanimously consent to introduce in the record a opinion piece by the editorial board of the Washington Post, December the 18th, 2012.
Without objection?
And this is an editorial about the nomination of Senator Hagel to be Secretary of Defense. Washington Post said, Mr. Hagel's stated positions on critical issues ranging from defense spending to Iran fall well to the left of those proposed by Mr. Obama during his first term and place him near the fringe of the Senate that would be asked to confirm him. The last line is, Mr. Hagel is an honorable man who served the country with distinction as a soldier in Vietnam and who was respected by his fellow senators. But Mr. Obama could make a better choice for Defense Secretary. That sort of sums up where I'm at. A fine man. If it was about friendship, wouldn't be a problem. This is about the times in which we live. And I would like to echo the statement about the Washington Post about being out of the mainstream. You had two hearings here, and we'll have a couple of votes, it looks like, in the next week or so. To my colleagues about the cloture vote today, you have every right to say now is not the time to end debate on Senator Hagel. He was reported out of committee at 5 o'clock Tuesday. There are some legitimate questions. There's some information that we haven't gathered that we should be able to have an opportunity to look at. And people not on the committee should have a chance to review this nomination. So the idea of waiting to after the break makes eminent sense, and I think we'll have a better informed decision. The debate should continue at least for that period of time. Now, Senator Kerry was able to get out of committee and vote on the same day because all of us felt comfortable with John Kerry, even though we disagreed with his politics. I believe that John Kerry is a good man. We, on the opposite issues sometimes when it comes to Iraq and initially Syria, but I always thought he was in the mainstream of the debate. So he got 97 votes because we felt comfortable. You can tell that people on our side and some others, quite frankly, in the Democratic Party, have expressed some discomfort. And I would argue after the hearing, there's more discomfort than there was before the hearing. That Senator Inhofe and Senator Levin, we had a very good hearing. But to me, it was unnerving, some of the things that came out of that hearing. The performance created more questions and doubts than it created confidence. And that is the question the Washington Post posed. Is Senator Hagel, it's one thing to be in the left lane, the right lane, or the center lane. I would say that Senator Hagel's statements and votes put him in a league of his own, and that is why I will vote no. When it comes to Israel, this statement, the Jewish lobby intimidates a lot of people up here. I'm not an Israeli senator, I'm a United States senator. Senator Hagel, to his credit, said that was inappropriate and apologized. But think for a minute, how many of you would say that? And when I asked him, name one senator who's intimidated, he couldn't name one senator. I said, name one policy we've enacted because of the Jewish-Israeli lobby that was dumb. He couldn't name a policy. Now we found out today, and I don't know if this has been verified yet, but it's posted that an aide of his reported that during a speech Senator Hagel gave several years ago, he said the United States Department of State was an extension of the Israeli government. Now, this is showing a chip on one's shoulder about Israel, an unhealthy statement, to say the least, and I think patently false but unnerving to a guy like me, and I can only imagine what kind of signals statements like that send in these dangerous times. Now, on Iran, he was one of 2 senators to vote against renewing unilateral U.S. sanctions against Iran and Libya in 2001. He was one of 12 senators who did not sign a letter asking the European Union to declare Hezbollah a terrorist organization. He refused to designate the Iranian Revolutionary
Senator
Guard.
has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. As a terrorist organization in 2007 while they were killing our soldiers in Iraq. He refused to sign a letter to President George W. Bush talking, he said to engage direct, unconditional, and comprehensive talks with the government of Iran. He was for that, telling Bush to do it unconditionally. He voted against comprehensive Iranian sanctions. He was one of 2 senators who failed to sign a letter to President Clinton showing unconditional support of the State of Israel. I would argue that this man's record when it comes to Iran and Israel and statements he's made put him well out of the mainstream, and the Washington Post was right, on the fringe. And now is not the time to have somebody on the fringe of Iran and Israel serving as Secretary of Defense. For that reason, I will vote no. I will oppose cloture because debate should continue. And when we get back, unless there's a real bombshell, I'll vote for cloture and move on to his nomination. Thank you.
Thank you.
I yield the floor.
Senator from Michigan.
Yield 5 minutes to the senator from West Virginia.
Senator from West Virginia.
Madam President, I'm proud to support Chuck Hagel for Secretary of Defense. If Chuck can make it through the jungles of Vietnam, he can surely make it through the bureaucracy of the Pentagon. America needs Chuck as our Secretary of Defense to bring our troops home and to keep our military the strongest in the world. Sergeant Hagel is an American hero. When so many Americans were dodging the draft, he volunteered to serve in Vietnam. The draft board gave him the option to return to college, but Chuck refused. He said, "I think the best thing for me is to go in the Army. It may not be the best thing for the Army, but I think that's the way to get all this straightened out. I was the oldest of 4 boys," he said. "My father had passed away, and I just was not coming together the way I should. There was a war going on in Vietnam. I felt a sense of some responsibility, so I said, no, I think it's time to go. And so I volunteered for the draft, went in the Army, and celebrated my 21st birthday down in White Sands Missile Range. And Chuck didn't serve in a safe billet. When assigned to Germany, he protested and asked to go to Vietnam. So he volunteered for Vietnam and saw the horrors of war as an infantry sergeant. Chuck and his youngest brother Tom are the only known American brothers to serve side by side in Vietnam. At different times, they risked their own life to save each other's. At one point, Tom frantically dressed a wound around Chuck's chest, hoping, praying that his older brother would make it out of Vietnam alive. And Chuck eventually returned the favor by dragging Tom out of a burning vehicle just before it exploded, saving his brother's life. You talk about brothers in arms, these were real brothers in arms. These experiences made Chuck who he is, and they help you and me understand why he is the right man to run the Pentagon and put in charge of defending America. Just listen to how Chuck describes what it was like to serve in Vietnam. He says, and I quote, "I walked a lot of point. My brother Tom and I together walked a lot of point, which was all right. You know what happens to a lot of point men? But I always felt a little better if I was up front than somebody else." Chuck is willing to walk point for America now. He has been walking point for most of his life. As Chuck describes a point man, as I think most people know, is the individual who is out front. And these are usually squad-sized patrols, sometimes a company-sized patrol, depending on the mission. And you have the front, physically the front position, but also the responsibility of essentially not walking your squad or your company into an ambush or a trap. So you had to be very, very focused on the peripheral vision and the antenna and just the sense and the instincts that something doesn't look right or grenades hanging in trees, which booby traps were just a way of life. You dealt with that all the time. And there were a lot of guys who just didn't pay attention to it. That's just the way they were. And I, again, always felt better if I was up front than maybe some others. Let me repeat that. Chuck Hagel always felt better if he was up front, where it was most dangerous. We live in dangerous times today. We need a man like Chuck Hagel right now, who has seen the horrors of war and will do all that he can to prevent another generation from seeing them. In my interactions with Chuck, I have been struck by his honesty, his sincerity, and his common sense approach. I know that if he were still a U.S. sitting senator, we'd probably be great friends. That's because we come from similar backgrounds and the same generation. He's like many Americans. He grew up in a working class, salt-of-the-earth family. In Chuck's words, he was raised in a little town, Nebraska, where the local Legion Club and the VFW Hall were really the centers of the universe. I can go on and on about Chuck Hagel, but let me just say this in closing. when I think about people, and I go to my little town in my community where I grew up in Farmington, West Virginia, and I know Chuck grew up in small towns in Nebraska, I've always said I can shake people's hand, look them in the eye, and they can see my soul. They know if I'm telling the truth or not, if I'm for real or sincere. I want to say to all of you, I have shook Chuck Hagel's hands. I've looked in his eyes, and I saw the soul of a good man, a man that I want leading this country, taking care of our youth, our infantry, our men and women in uniform. So I implore that all of my colleagues would consider voting for Chuck Hagel. Thank you.
Madam President,
Senator from Rhode Island.
could I make a parliamentary inquiry? How much time does each side have?
The Democrats have 22 minutes, and the Republicans have 12 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would yield myself 5 minutes.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, as so many of my colleagues have described, Chuck Hagel is a soldier, statesman, a businessman, a patriot. As my colleague from West Virginia pointed out, he could have chosen a much easier path in the 1960s, a path that many trod. But he chose the most difficult, not only to join the Army, but to volunteer for Vietnam when he had the opportunity to serve honorably and well in Europe. He joined his brother. He fought in combat. He knows the pressures that our men and women in uniform face, and he knows that the decisions that we make here and the decisions that are made in the Pentagon ultimately are carried out by those young men and women in uniform. In fact, I can't think of anyone over the last several decades who have learned that lesson so well. The other thing that's so impressive is that it's not just a one-dimensional resume. He was a businessman, very successful, founded his own company, created jobs, created opportunities, was the Deputy Administrator of the Veterans Administration. He's run a large federal agency. Very seldom do people come into one of these positions having run a federal agency or at least being the second in command. And then he's been a United States Senator, so he knows very well the procedures and the personalities that are here in the United States Congress. But to me, one of the most compelling endorsements comes from those who have actually done the job before him. When Bob Gates and Bill Cohen and Bill Perry stand up and say, this is the person for the job, you've got to believe that. These gentlemen have done the job for Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, and they've done it with great distinction. And then when you get someone like Brent Scowcroft, who is, in my view, probably one of the most knowledgeable and authoritative voices on national security, he was the National Security Advisor for President George Herbert Walker Bush, who also weighs in, along with Madeleine Albright. You have, I think, the compelling, irrefutable evidence and testimony of those who have done the job that Chuck Hagel can do the job. And then there's been a lot said and discussed about, does he truly appreciate the relationship between the United States and some of our closest allies, particularly Israel? And here you have the current Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, Danny Ayalon, who also served as our ambassador from Israel to the United States, saying he's met him. He feels, in his view, and I'll paraphrase, that he has a true understanding of the natural partnership between the United States and Israel. Again, compelling evidence. Add to that the unconditional endorsement of several former United States ambassadors to Israel, American patriots who have dedicated themselves to maintaining that relationship, strong, vital, vibrant, crucial to both the State of Israel and the United States. The evidence accumulates more and more that the President has chosen well and wisely. This is a critical time. We're looking at conflicts in Afghanistan. We're looking at a nuclear detonation on the Korean Peninsula. We're looking at budget problems that have never faced any previous Secretary of Defense that have to be addressed within weeks and days. There's a ministerial meeting next week in Brussels for our defense ministers. We have to maintain our alliances. All these forces come together. And so I think the evidence is overwhelming. The President has chosen well and wisely. But let me make one final point. This is an historic vote. By my recollection, no candidate for the Secretary of Defense, no nominee, has been defeated, delayed,
or dismissed on a procedural vote. That our history suggests because of this office, because it is one so closely associated with the President making life-or-death decisions, that deference is given to that choice, at least that it's not caught up in a procedural battle, that there is an up or down vote. My colleagues, in good faith, after careful study, can vote aye or nay. But to defeat someone on a procedural vote would be unprecedented and unwarranted. And as a result, Madam President, I would urge that this motion before us, this procedural motion, be carried, cloture be dispensed with, and we can get on to express our true feelings based on the evidence and based on our best judgment of whether or not Senator Hagel should serve as Secretary of Defense. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we'll probably have some more coming down wanting to have time a little bit later on, so I may stay with the amount of time. Well, I guess I won't if I can't make that work. There we go. Let me, first of all, just start off by saying I agree with almost everything that they've said on both sides about Chuck Hagel. I agree that he was a hero. I know he was. I think of my own Army career and think of his and how much greater his was. That isn't the issue here. I think both Senator Graham and Senator McCain said it very well. Yes, his character is wonderful. We love the guy. He served his country. All of those things are true. The problem is the stances that he has taken. Primarily, and most of what they said had to do with Israel and countries like Iran. Now, these are countries that Israel has historically been a very, very close ally of ours, and I've often said our only true ally in the Middle East that you can always count on. But I think that we need to look at this as the individual and how he would act, judging from his past performance as the Secretary of Defense. Now, let me say this. The vote that's coming up at 4:15, this is the vote for or against Hagel. This has all this talk about a procedure vote, about filibustering and all that. No, this is the vote that takes place in terms of whether or not Chuck Hagel should be the next Secretary of Defense. Now, this statement that's been made over and over and over again that, well, this is the first time this has ever happened. Look, we have people all the time in cabinet positions who are subjected to a 60-vote threshold. This happens all the time. I look at just some of them I have right here, starting on the Republican side. I can remember when Kathleen Sebelius, who is now the Secretary of Health and Human Services in 2009, there are a lot of people who didn't think that she would be good, and so they objected to this so that it would be forced into a 60-vote threshold. I mean, that's what happened. John Bryson, he was up for Secretary of Commerce. And you know, I didn't think he'd make a very good Secretary of Commerce. I opposed him, and he was subjected to the 60-vote margin. Here's the interesting thing. If you look, I mean, today we have Barack Obama, who's a Democrat, President of the United States. Then we have Harry Reid, who is the majority leader. And so the Democrats are in control of both. Now, if you think back at what happened back during the last Bush administration, we had exactly the reverse. George Bush was President of the United States, and the Democrats were a minority. Same situation. So what happened? First of all, we had Bolton come up, John Bolton. Same thing, subjected to a 60-vote margin. We had Dirk Kempthorne. We all remember Dirk Kempthorne. There are a lot of people that did not approve of him. He was appointed by Bush, a Republican, and then when he came over here, the Democrats didn't like him. They subjected him to a 60-vote margin. That wasn't a filibuster. This isn't a filibuster today. People are trying to say that and blame me as being the bad guy that's causing a filibuster. It's not the case at all, any more than it was the case back in the 2005, 2006, and other times when we had a nominee that was put forth by President Bush and was objected to by the Democrats. Now, Dirk Kempthorne, when he was nominated to be the Secretary of Interior, there was a lot of opposition to him on the other side. And, of course, they said, well, we got to subject him to a 60-vote threshold. Well, that was a cabinet position. They seem to be drawing a distinction for some reason between the Secretary of Defense and any other cabinet positions. On a level, they're the same. And this happens over and over again. I'll tell you one thing. Well, Rob Portman, in this, Senator Portman, the same thing happened to him when he was appointed by Bush to the U.S. Trade Representatives. Now, it was vitiated later on, but it was objected to first so that he would have been subjected to a 60-vote threshold. Now, the one that's kind of interesting is Stephen Johnson. Bush appointed him to be the EPA administrator. Actually, he was a guy that I thought a lot of, and he was a Democrat. So we had here Bush, a Republican, appointing a Democrat that was objected to by the Democrats. Now we have Obama, a Democrat, nominating a Republican and objected to by the Republicans. Exactly the reverse. Exactly. There's no difference at all. And so I think that it should be abundantly clear to everyone that members of the committee, now I'm the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, every member of the committee, I will stand up, I'll walk through fire to make sure that they have all their questions answered. That's what advice and consent is all about. We want to look at the individual. In the case of our committee, we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to fully look at the process and make sure that everything is out there. I see this is kind of a funny thing, Madam President. This distinguished man over here, the junior senator from Texas, Senator Cruz, lost his voice. Now, you know, for a senator to lose his voice, that's what worse can happen than that. Well, so he's not able to speak. But if he could, I would say that he would say, it's not so much my concern, which is all the issues that have been articulated by Senator McCain and by Senator Graham, it would be the process. The fact that here's a guy who didn't want to, who is a new member of the committee, a new member of the Senate, came in, and he knew that he was entitled to, I give myself 3 additional minutes. He was entitled to have all of his questions answered. He's tried now. For weeks he's tried. He's stonewalled. He can't get him. And so it's the process. He's not making any accusations. He says, I just want to have what I've asked for. And let me tell you, I have the utmost respect for Carl Levin. He and I, in spite of what the media wishes, we get along great. I love the guy. And we disagree now and then on policy, but I really like him. The other day he said, now listen to this, Madam President. He said, quote, this is Carl Levin, every member, repeated it, every member, that includes Texas, every member should add his or her voice to the demand for the production of relevant documents which senators need to decide on confirmation or for any other legitimate reason. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with it. And that's exactly what these individuals are asking for. They're asking for that information. Now, I regret, he's very articulate, I regret that he lost his voice today, but that is kind of funny. Anyway, this is what has happened in the past. Every time the opposition, the minority, has objected and has wanted to procedurally have a 60-vote margin, that's happened. It's happened with a consent agreement. I asked for that, and I think that we have that now, but we had to force it. I understand that. This is not a filibuster. It's the same thing that was required and requested back by Harry Reid when he was the minority leader against John Bolton, against Stephen Johnson, against Robert Portman, against Dirk Kempthorne. This is a normal way of operating. So a lot of us still don't have the information that we want. But I would say this, I'm willing and they are willing. I've checked with the people who have not gotten all the information they want. They said, let's go ahead and have the vote. So they, in a way, are they caving in? Well, they're just doing all they can to be conciliatory. And I just think it's, you know, we're doing everything we can. We're not filibustering, and we don't want to string this thing out. But I just want to repeat one last time. This vote is the vote on Chuck Hagel. It's not on procedure or anything else. It's a vote on Chuck Hagel. With that, I retain the balance of my time.
Senator from Michigan.
Time does the majority have?
17 minutes remain for the majority.
I think.
And 3 minutes for the minority.
Uh, 5 minutes, the senator from Illinois.
Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, this is rare. Twice in the history of the Senate have we had a filibuster involving a nominee for a cabinet position. Twice. What's especially disappointing about this is that it was just a few weeks ago we came together on a bipartisan basis and we said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to try to work together. We're going to try to avoid these filibusters. And here we have, sadly, an historic filibuster over an appointment of a former United States Senator, Chuck Hagel, Republican of Nebraska, as Secretary of Defense. Now, I know there's controversy associated with his nomination, but I also know Chuck Hagel. I served on the Senate Intelligence Committee with him. We served together in the United States Senate. No question in my mind, the President made a good choice. I'll also tell you that you need to know a little bit about the man to understand why it's an historic choice. Chuck Hagel volunteered and enlisted in the United States Army during the Vietnam era. That was not a casual decision. That was a time when enlisting in the Army meant you might risk your life. Well, he lucked out. He got stationed in a theater that wasn't at war, but what did he do next? He volunteered to go to Vietnam. Volunteered as an enlisted man to go to Vietnam. And he went there, with his brother, incidentally, the two of them, to serve in the United States Army. He was involved directly in combat, was given the Purple Heart for his service, and told me personally about days that he'll never forget as long as he lives. So does Chuck Hagel know what it takes to be a soldier? Does he know what it takes to lead the Department of Defense? He certainly does. I served on the Senate Intelligence Committee with him. I know his feelings on the issues, and when I listen to how some of his positions have been distorted, I find it hard to believe. Chuck Hagel was a conservative Republican senator and an honest man of integrity. And some of the things that have been said about him, some of the charges that have been made in the course of the Armed Services Committee were just embarrassing, Mr. Chairman. They were embarrassing. To think that colleagues in the United States Senate would say that about a man they knew and served with personally, or they should have known better than to say. And that's why we're here today. The sad reality is I've listened to many Republican senators who are not going to vote for Chuck Hagel come up here and talk about how important it is to fill this position. The North Koreans detonate nuclear devices this week and raise concerns all over that part of the world and beyond. We know what's going on in the Middle East, in Syria and other places. We still have 68,000 plus American soldiers who are literally risking their lives while we meet in the comfort and security of the Senate chamber. In Afghanistan, they are risking their lives. And we are saying, well, we'd sure like to appoint a Secretary of Defense, but we've got to make a political point here today. We've got to vote against him today and put it off for 10 days. Then we may reconsider it again. God forbid something awful occurs in the next 10 days. I hope it doesn't. There are still good people at the Pentagon, and I'm sure they'll do a good job. But we should have that Secretary of Defense, one of the most critical appointments in the President's cabinet, filled. This notion that we have to make a political stand here and stop Chuck Hagel today to make some political point really troubles me. Some of the requests for information about Chuck Hagel go beyond any of the standards of disclosure we've ever seen before. This isn't fair. It isn't fair to Chuck Hagel. It isn't fair to the President. It certainly isn't fair to the men and women in uniform all across the United States and around the world who are risking their lives for this country. Those who come to the floor and say in 10 days he'll be fine, for goodness sake, swallow your pride. Let's make sure we vote for him today. Let's fill this spot. Let's not have this sad, historic filibuster on this appointment to the President's cabinet. I really hope that my colleagues will reflect on what Chuck Hagel has meant in his life as a service to the country, his service to the state of Nebraska, and his service to this nation as a United States Senator. He is a good man. He'll do a good job in the Department of Defense. I trust the President's judgment. And for anyone who thinks they're making a political point, in order to kind of show the president that we can still filibuster, I remind him, it was just a few weeks ago, we stood on the floor and said, we're going to be more thoughtful about the use of the filibuster in the future. We're going to be more careful that we don't politicize it. Today, unfortunately, what's happening is a serious disappointment. I yield the floor.
Mr. President, may I ask Senator Levin, through the chair, a question?
I'd be happy to yield some time to the senator from California. How many minutes
Well, whatever you wish.
how many minutes does the majority have left?
12 minutes
I
remaining.
yield 2 minutes to the senator.
Thank you.
The senator from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am glad we're voting today on the President's choice for Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, our former colleague. And I stand here as a senator who had a number of questions about some of the things he said in the past and some of the votes that he cast and some of his philosophy. And what I did as soon as I learned that he was the President's pick, remember, the President's the Commander-in-Chief. This is a critical appointment. It's got to be someone he has his faith in, he puts his trust in, and he picked someone, a brave hero who served in Vietnam. So I wrote all my questions down, and believe me, they covered some tough ground on women's rights, on gay rights, on Iran, on Israel, a number of questions. And I asked if it would be all right if when the answers came we could put it online and people could see the answers, and absolutely the answer came back yes. And the answers to my questions were very clear and very strong. Senator Hagel has evolved on certain issues. He admitted a mistake in a couple. Now, that is the hardest thing for any politician to admit. 4 words that we hate to say: I made a mistake. And he admitted it on a couple of issues. And I just think the way he's being treated here is so sad. It's so sad. And when I watch some of the questioning from my colleagues, not all of them, a couple of them, and I'm not referring to my dear, dear, dear friend, Senator Inhofe. It was really reminiscent of a different time and place when you said, I have here in my pocket a speech that you made on such and such a date, and of course nothing was in the pocket. It was reminiscent of some bad times. So I'm so glad we're voting here today. And I know it's going to be a close vote. I don't know what the outcome is. I do believe eventually this good man will be the Secretary of Defense. I believe that in my heart. But if anyone is still undecided on this vote, let's understand that never in the history have we had a 60-vote requirement, to my knowledge, for a nominee for Secretary of Defense. Now, if I'm wrong, I hope to be corrected. And there's a reason for it. Lord knows I was one of the key voices of dissent on the Iraq War. And I wasn't happy about a lot of the people that were put into place by George W. Bush. Believe me, I didn't want to see them continue in those positions. I think that they led us astray in Iraq, and it led to so many thousands of deaths. But I never dreamed of requiring a 60-vote majority. This is not a good day for the Senate, in my view. And I know my friend Senator Inhofe is very sincere, but I have to say, I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. I'm a senior member of that committee. We have listened to the State Department on Benghazi. We had briefings and hearings, and answers came, and we had secret briefings that are highly classified. We had open hearings. I would ask for 30 seconds.
Without objection.
And I've got to say, what more are you trying to get out of this? Benghazi was a crisis. It was a disaster. It was terrible. There should have been more security there, but don't blame the brave Americans for it. Blame the terrorists who did this. And as the facts became available, those facts came right out. But why are we trying to stop this good man because of something he had nothing to do with. So in closing, I hope if you're on the fence, you'll vote today for Chuck Hagel and a yes vote on cloture.
Inquiry.
Senator from Oklahoma.
For a parliamentary inquiry before the clock starts here. I understand we have 3 minutes left on our side, and how many minutes left on the majority side?
7 minutes and 15 seconds on the majority side.
Okay, I don't see anyone who's seeking recognition over here, so I'll go ahead and take the last 3 minutes. Well, first of all, it's very interesting, and all of those on the other side who are supporting Hagel, Senator Hagel, for being the next Secretary of Defense, not one of them says anything at all about the issues. They all talk about the things with which we agree. He was a hero. We've said it. Senator McCain said it. Senator Graham said it. We all agree that he was a hero in the war, and he is deserving of this type of thing. What they don't talk about is why is it not one of them has mentioned that Senator Hagel is one of only 2 senators who voted against sanctions against Iran? Why is it they don't mention that he was one of only 4? In fact, all of them signed a letter for solidarity with Israel. He was one of 4 senators who didn't sign that letter of solidarity for Israel. The same thing as declaring the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group. He was one of only 4 senators who did that. So I would only say this is not a filibuster. Everybody knows it's not a filibuster. It sounds good, and I hope the media is listening up there. This is not a filibuster. This is the same thing that was required by the Democrats in the case of John Bolton, in the case of Steve Johnson, in the case of Rob Portman, in the case of Dirk Kempthorne. It is a prerogative of the Senate. It's not a filibuster. We merely want a 60-vote margin. We received it in all of those cases, and I commented earlier. That was when we had a Republican in the White House and a Democrat in the majority in the Senate. And so they made that same requirement. I was here for all 4 of them. I never objected to that. Then, of course, you had the Kathleen Sebelius, who's there right now, cabinet position, the same as this is, a cabinet position. You had Secretary of Commerce, John Bryson. I objected to him. He passed the 60-vote margin. So the only issue here is the 60-vote margin, and that's what we're talking about. It's not a filibuster. And the last thing I'll say is I will read, again, since our last speaker is my very good friend, the chairman of the committee, when he said the other day, and I wholeheartedly agreed with him, he said, quote, every member should add his or her voice to the demand for the production of relevant documents which senators need to decide on confirmation. I agree with that. And this whole thing, really, some people don't object to some of the things he's said and done in the past. But what we do object to is the process, that we have members who have made requests for information that were relevant to this appointment, and they're unable to receive that. So it's a process, and I will stand up as the minority, ranking minority on the Senate Armed Services Committee for the rights of every single minority member of that committee, the same as Senator Levin would stand up for the rights of every majority member of that committee in this process. And I thank the President.
Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I would yield myself the balance of the time. Mr. President, first of all, the questions which have been asked of us to provide materials and of the nominee have fallen into 3 categories. The first, questions to the White House about Benghazi, that those questions have been answered. Requests for Senator Hagel's speeches, those speeches have been provided. And relative to financial disclosure, additional financial disclosure, the disclosure which is required by the rules has been provided. The statement about that was made by one of our colleagues about Corsair Capital is a statement which, frankly, is out of bounds, inappropriate for anyone to be asked when he is an advisor to a perfectly legitimate fund, an equity fund, which has perfectly legitimate other members of the board, and there is no evidence, and the person making the innuendo acknowledged it, no evidence that the funding came from Saudi Arabia, Iran, or any other inappropriate place. so much for the information that's been provided. More information probably than any nominee that, of recent memory at least, has had to provide. We've done everything we possibly can to do it. Now, in terms of the qualifications for Senator Hagel. This comes from former Secretaries of State, National Security Advisors, National Secretaries of Defense, Secretary Albright, Security Advisor Berger, Secretary of Defense Brown, National Security Advisor Brzezinski, Secretary of Defense Cohen, Secretary Gates, National Security Advisor Jones, Secretary of Defense Laird, National Security Advisor McFarland, Secretary of Defense Perry, Secretary of State Powell, Secretary of State Schultz, National Security Advisor Scowcroft. This is what they say. This is the validation. We obviously know Senator Hagel. We trust Senator Hagel. We believe in his qualifications. But these are people outside, Democrats and Republicans outside of this body. And here's what they say. From his time as Deputy Veterans Administrator managing 250,000 employees during the Reagan presidency, to turning around the financially troubled world USO, to shepherding the post-9/11 GI Bill into law as United States Senator, and most recently through his service on the Defense Policy Board at the Pentagon and as co-chairman of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, Chuck Hagel is uniquely qualified to meet the challenges facing the Department of Defense. And I've already put into the record many statements that have been written by veterans organizations in support of Senator Hagel. Relative to Iran, this is what he says relative to Iran. Iran poses a significant threat.
Is not in order. Please take your conversations outside the chamber. Senator will proceed.
Senator Inhofe said, well, no one talks about his position on Iran. Yes, we do. Here's what he says. Iran poses a significant threat to the United States, our allies and partners, and our interests in the region and globally. Iran continues to pursue an illicit nuclear program that threatens to provoke a regional arms race. And he is fully committed to the President's goal of preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. All options must be on the table to achieve that goal. And relative to Israel, he has said he is a strong supporter of Israel. Even more important, the Deputy Minister of Defense of Israel says that he is a good friend of Israel and indeed, in the words of Danny Ayalon, said that he believes, and he's now talking about Senator Hagel, Senator Hagel believes in the natural partnership between Israel and the United States and is proud of the volume of defense relations between Israel and the United States, which are so important to both countries. Now the only question remains as to what we're voting on. What we're voting on here is to end the filibuster. Now, my good friend from Oklahoma says it's not a filibuster, but the definition of a filibuster under our rules is when you say that you're going to continue to talk unless there's 60 votes to end debate. That's what we're voting on. It's called cloture. And if we get cloture today, then there will be another vote on the nomination of Senator Hagel. And the proof of that is that we had 3 Republican senators stand up here today who say that while they're going to vote against cloture today, that they are going to vote for cloture a week from this Tuesday. That is a procedural vote if I ever heard it. They're still going to vote against his nomination, but they have decided that they will vote for cloture a week from Tuesday. That's the difference between the process vote to end debate and the vote on the nomination itself. So let no one kid each other. What we're deciding here today is whether a filibuster will continue. That's not just me talking. That's the rules speaking. That's what the rules provide for, that you need 60 votes to end debate. Has there ever been a requirement before by opponents of a nominee that there be 60 votes to end debate? Has this ever happened in history? Not to a nominee for the Defense Department? No. Secretary of Defense? No. For other cabinet officers, there have been in the past requirements set by opponents that to stop talking, you're going to have to get 60 votes. But that only means what the rules say it means, that under the rules of this body, that conversation, debate does not end if the opponents insist on it until there be 60 votes. That is the definition of a filibuster, and that's what I hope we can bring to an end today. If we don't bring it to an end today, then there will be another vote a week from Tuesday. But I hope we don't have to do that. This is too important a position. The dangers in this world are too severe to leave this position in this ambiguous state between now and a week from Tuesday or whenever the final vote on final passage or approval of this nomination is. The world is too dangerous to have this period of uncertainty. There is no need for it. We have provided the documents which have been required, the information relative to the financial situation of Senator Hagel has been provided. It is time for us now to bring the debate to an end. It will require 60 votes, and then hopefully, if we can get 60 votes today, then vote on the final approval of this nominee. But again, if 60 votes aren't there today, the majority leader has made it clear that he would then, of course, reconsider the cloture petition for a week from Tuesday. Either way, it's critically important that Senator Hagel's confirmation take place and that we fill this position as Secretary of Defense. Mr. President, I don't...
20 seconds. All time has expired. Under the previous order, the clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the nomination of Charles Timothy Hagel of Nebraska to be Secretary of Defense, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the nomination of Charles Timothy Hagel of Nebraska to be Secretary of Defense shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
No.
Johannes, gotcha. Mr. Cornyn. Bennett. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cowan. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Fisher. Mr. Flake. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heinrich. Ms. Heitkamp. Mr. Heller. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Hoeven. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kane. Mr. King. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Murphy. Mrs. Murray. I got you. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. This is cloture. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Scott. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Ms. Warren. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Bennett, Boxer, Brown, Coons, Hagan, Harkin, Heinrich, Heitkamp, Johans, King, Murray, Nelson, Reed of Rhode Island, Reed of Nevada, Rockefeller, Schumer, and Udall of New Mexico. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Ayotte, Bozeman, Burr, Cornyn, Crapo, Cruz, Flake, Graham, Grassley, Inhofe, Isaacson, Lee, McCain, and McConnell. Mr. Barrasso. No. Mr. Barrasso, no. Mr. Cowan. Mr. Cowan, aye. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, no. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schatz, aye. Mr. Coates. No. Mr. Coates, no. Mr. Sessions, no. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders, aye. Mr. Franken. Mr. Franken, aye. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Donnelly, aye. Mr. Begich. Mr. Begich, aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, no. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kirk, no. Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono, aye. Mr. Manchin. Mr. Manchin, aye. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Kane. Mr. Kane, aye. Mr. Enzi. Mr. Enzi, no. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker, no. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren, aye. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, no. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Carper. Aye. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor. Aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy. Aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch. No. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Blunt. No. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, aye. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Ms. Baldwin. Ms. Baldwin, aye. Mr. Corker. Mr. Corker, no. Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Fisher, no. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, no. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, no. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, no. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Tester, aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu, aye. Mr. Moran. No. Mr. Moran. No. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Ms. Mikulski. Ms. Mikulski, aye. Mr. Hoeven. Mr. Hoeven, no. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin, aye. You're an aye, hi. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Durbin, aye. Ms. Cantwell, aye.